Hi, I'm Tom, and today we're going to have a quick look at the basics of React custom hooks. If you're new here, please do like and subscribe, and feel free to leave a little comments. I'll definitely get back to you. And let's get stuck into it. So, what are custom hooks in React? Basically, it's far less complicated than it sounds. Custom hooks are pieces of logic that we take out of a component so we can use them in multiple places to save us from repeating the same code in various components, right? It's just about being dry, about do not repeat yourself. Um, so basically, they're for saving time and saving lines of code. As a convention, we name them starting with the word use, just like the other hooks in React, like use effect and use state. And just like the other hooks, they can access state and they can access other hooks as necessary. I mean, they're part of React, right? So if inside your custom hook you want to use effect, you can go right ahead. Typical use cases are basically any time you've got logic that you might want in more than one place in your app. API calls are a great example of that. So perhaps various components in your app will need to make API calls. You could probably, whether you're using Axios or just Fetch or whatever, you could probably set that up once and then call it where you need it and just pass it the information it needs. We're going to do something a little bit more simple today, actually, and I've got two basic examples here. So let's just have a look at this site that I've just mocked up right here. So it's just a web page with 5 pages. So we've got a home page, we've got an about page, a page about games, some photos, and a blog. And I've just created those components. So they're actually different types, the different pages. There's not just one page component for reasons I'll come to later. And I've just imported React Router just so we've got this basic navigation. And so what we've got here um, is an SPA, a single page application. So for those of you who don't know what that is, basically instead of having lots of physical pages like you would in a flat HTML site, we appear to have pages, but actually they're all just coming from React, and we're just using the navigation to instantly move between them. So there's no going back and forth to the database. And as you can see, the router is updating the URL that I've got here. I should just add, I'm making this in the Scrimba browser. Um, Scrimba is really quite a nice environment to develop in. Very quick to set up a React project. You don't have to go through installing all of the Create React App stuff. You can do it very quickly. And it works very much like VS Code. So anything that you do here is going to work just fine if you take it off to VS Code. And I will, of course, put links both to this scrim and to my GitHub if you just want to have a closer look at the code. So that being said, we've got this SPA, this single page application. Apart from looking obnoxious, which it does, it's really not particularly pretty, there are a few problems. Vertical scrolling in SPAs can do something a little bit annoying. So we're on the home page, we go to the about page, let's say we read some of the about page. Now we go and look at the games page. Look, we're halfway down this page. I go to the other pages. Typically, when you go to a page, you want to start at the top. So it would be really nice if we could send the user to the top of the page every time they went to a new page. Well, it's pretty easy to do. All you really need to do, and we could take that perhaps on the about page. Let's go for the game page. We could take in use effect here, which I've already imported, and we could set that up. So if we just call use effect, so we know we're going to take an arrow function in here. We don't need a dependency array here because there's no dependencies. We just want this to run every time it renders. How do we get the page to scroll to the top? Should just be window.scroll to, and then you put the coordinates 0, 0. So that's a 0 vertical, 0 horizontal. Um, Hopefully now, if we save that one, now if we go to the About page, let's scroll down. If we go to the Photos page, we're still scrolled down the blog page, we're still in the middle Games page. It takes us to the top. So that works. It's only that little bit of code, and you could just cut and paste that everywhere, import use effect everywhere, no problem. But if we were going to save ourselves a bit of time and make the code, as I say, a bit drier, we could do that with a hook. So what I've done over here is I've made a little hooks folder already. There's nothing in it. So let's go right ahead and we're going to set up a little hook called use scroll to top. So I'm just going to put in here, use scroll to top.js, and I'm just going to move that into the hooks folder. Great. So we've got our hook. Now, quite a lot of the logic we've actually already just written. It is going to be very, very quick, this one. So if we just go back to the game page, wasn't it? Yeah. So let's just take that use effect from there and we'll plonk it in here. And the other thing that we need to use in this hook is use effect itself. So we need to import that. Now, I'm going to import React just because the Scrimba browser is still on a slightly older version of React. So obviously, if you're slightly more up to date, you won't need to import it. Import use effect as well from React. And of course, we need to give this a name. Hooks, custom hooks are functions just like any other component in React. So I'm going to export function, and we're calling it use scroll to top. And I'm just going to set this up just like a normal function, which is basically what it is. And we'll put that in there. Let's just get the formatting straight. So that is it. That is our hook right there. And all we need to do is call that where it's needed, which in this app is going to be basically on any page we want. So we can start back in, well, if we just go in vertical order, we'll start back in the game page. Only one thing that we need to do, or two things we need to do. We need to import it. So let's just do that here. So we're importing. Now this is a named import because I just exported the function. I didn't do export default. So use scroll to top from, and it's in the hooks folder. So that is at hooks, and just copy and paste that to be a bit quicker. Use scroll to top. And then literally with this one, all we need to do is call it. Just put the brackets on the end. So it fires when the game page is called. Leave a little bit more space there. And that's it. So we don't actually need to import use effect anymore for this one. So what we might just do quickly to save time, if I just copy that there, then I can copy and paste those at the same time. Let's just delete that now. And if we go to our other components, again, we've got use effect in this one we don't need. So we're going to import that there. and put scroll to top. And if we go over to photo, just cut and paste. Um, and that. Formatted those properly. Did we? Did that one. And lastly, the post, which I think is what holds the blog. Oh, put it in the wrong order. So we've got that one in there. Let's just see if it works. We're going to get an error. So we can go from home, about games. Let's do some scrolling then. Oh, and it brings us right up to the top. So we scroll down, we go home, it takes us to the top. Perfect. So now any user who navigates through the site, that hook is just taking them right up to the top. We haven't saved loads of time or code here, have we? Because I mean, it's such a short hook, but that's just how they work. Let's do one more hook then. You might have noticed something else with this page, and that is that some of the pages have got an annoying horizontal scroll, and that is because of the image size on this narrow format. So if I go to games, look, we've got this one here because the image is actually too big. Go to photos, we've got these seagulls, same problem. Not such a problem if you've got a larger screen size. The layout's obviously horrible, but on mobile size, quite annoying. So lazy web dev doesn't want to deal with the image size and basically just want to prompt the users that are using mobile screens to view it on landscape view. That's a really obviously quite a silly example, but actually for some things, trying to persuade mobile users to switch to landscape view instead of portrait can definitely be extremely useful, whatever it is you're doing. So yeah, this is a useful thing to be doing, even if we're doing it for a pretty daft reason here. Now to do this, I'm going to use window.innerWidth, but you should just be aware that there are issues with that. Typically on mobile devices, when the on-screen keyboard comes up, that actually has an effect on what window.innerWidth returns. So that can actually cause a bit of upheaval and problems. There are other options. There's screen.orientation that at time of recording is still experimental and it's not supported fully. But there are a number of other ways of achieving what we're talking about here, which is basically understanding the orientation of the screen. So I'm using window.innerWidth just to do this very basically and make a judgment about whether the height of the screen or the width of the screen is longer, and letting that inform the decision as to whether it is landscape or portrait mode. So yeah, this is more about the hook than about this being a fantastic way to implement that exact function if needed. Right, so let's go and create another hook then. As I say, this one is going to be a little bit more, tiny little bit more complicated. So I'm going to call this one use orientation. I need camel case there. And let's just put that in the hooks folder. I think it's a good idea. Obviously, a million different ways to organize React projects, and you know, one isn't necessarily any better than the other. But I think it is quite a nice idea just to keep your hooks in one folder and know exactly where they are. Your mileage may vary. So what do we want to happen in this use orientation hook? Um, Couple of things actually that we need to do, but of course we need to start off with importing React. We are going to use all of other hooks in here as well. So we're going to import use effect and we're going to import use state. Okay, so just like before, we want to export our function, and this function we've called use orientation. Can I spell that properly? Use orientation. Yeah, that looks all right. And um, right, so what do we actually want to do? Um, we want to figure out basically the potential for there being some um, choice or a prompt to tell the user to change their screen orientation. And what I'm thinking is that we'll just be able to use that on some pages. It doesn't matter on about or home. It matters on games. It matters on photos. It doesn't matter on blogs. So we're just going to use that in some places. So this hook is going to return something which is going to allow us to conditionally render a message to the user prompting them to turn their device. So I think what it's going to return is going to be a piece of state, and we've got a use state already imported. So let's go ahead and set up, we'll say is portrait and set is portrait. And we are going to initialize that then with a value of false. So we're just going to assume at the moment, it doesn't really matter. You could initialize it with true or false because obviously it's going to be one way or the other, and you don't know. So the next thing to do is to figure out actually what the orientation is. So we're going to create a function here, and let's just call it get screen orientation. And so the logic of that function, I'm going to start off with just a quick if clause here. And I'm going to say if window.innerWidth is less than 1025. Now, 1025 is a bit arbitrary, but basically the bigger tablets like iPad Pro come in just under that. So that's hopefully going to separate off the desktop items, the desktop devices from the mobile portable devices like phones and tablets. I'm working off that basis. Obviously this is just a demo. You'll have to think what's best for your project. Now, the next thing to do is just a little bit more conditional logic. So we're going to take set is portrait, and basically what we're going to set it to is window dot height, window dot inner height is less than window dot inner width. We could leave it like that because that's obviously going to return a Boolean, but I don't know if it's not a bit clearer just to bring that out with this ternary conditional style here and just make it really, really clear that if that is the case, we'll return, I think we've got that the wrong way around, isn't it? Is portrait. So if the height is smaller than the width, it's not portrait. That's okay, I think. We'll come back to that if necessary. So anyway, that's going to get us our Boolean. um, which in a minute we can think about what we do with that actually on the page. Right, what else do we need? So use effects. We want this to run when the component renders. Um, and we also, if we're just thinking, so they're looking in portrait mode, the user gets a message telling them to switch to landscape. When they switch to landscape, we want that message to disappear. So we need to listen out for screen changes. Um, and again, there will be other ways of doing this, and I think in the future there will be better ways of doing this. But for the purposes of this demo, um, let's just see what we can do. So let's set up this use effect. Again, I'm not going to use a dependency array. We don't need one in this. Perhaps we do, actually. I may regret saying that in a moment. Um, so the first thing we want this use effect to do is we want it to get um, to call this function. So we want to do that first when the page renders, when the component renders, and that is going to just sort of cover the first instance. Now we also want to cover the instance where a user follows the prompt and moves the phone and therefore changes the size of the screen and perhaps makes that message disappear. So we're going to add an event listener, and what we're going to listen out for is resize. Now I'm using that here. It's a bit strange for changing orientation, but I tested this out on a mobile earlier, and it does register the fact that a move from portrait to landscape is a change of orientation. So it does work for this rather contrived example. Um, and anyway, when we have listened out for the event, the function that we want to fire is, of course, this one up here. Um, when we add an event listener in use effect, we can cause ourselves problems. And basically, what we need to remember to do is to remove that event listener when the component unmounts, right? So pretty easy to do in use effect. All you have to do is return a function, and or basically returning a callback function, which is going to do the complete opposite of what we've just done. So it's remove event listener, and then we give it the same info. So it's listening out for the resize, and it's calling the get screen orientation. Right. So what's this hook going to return? Basically, it's going to return this piece of state out here, and then that is what the component can use. The return is portrait. Right, is that... check everything is okay with that. I'm a bit surprised that hasn't turned red. Suggests there might be an error. Let's give it a save and see what we get. Maybe not. Okay. Well, let's give it a whirl. So the pages that we particularly want to use this on are games and photos. Those are the ones with the overhang. Now, I've got different components rendering the different page types. One for, I think, home and about, and then a different one for games, a different one for photos, a different one for the blog. It could all be the same. I mean, it could just be page, 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 in which case you might have to pass some props to make it clear which ones want to use the custom hooks, because obviously you can't just put it right there in the component because it's going to turn up on every rendering of that component. But unless you want it on every rendering of that component, you might do. So let's head over to the game page and we'll import this one. Let's copy a bit of that. So we're going to use orientation, and that is coming from hooks, use orientation. So I might just give this a save just to check. Yeah, seems okay. Now, unlike this one that we made earlier, use orientation is actually going to return us a value that we are going to do something with. So I'm just going to say we'll call it better on landscape equals use orientation. And we're going to call that function because we want to get what that function returns. So better on landscape is like a question, true or false. Now, what we can do is come down here, and perhaps we'll come just above the image but under the title, and we're just going to conditionally render something. So I'm going to say better on landscape. If that's true, I'm going to put a little p tag in there, and I'm going to say this page, don't need capitals, this page would look better on landscape. Now, if better on landscape is false, then we don't need anything. Let's just set that to null. They're already where they should be. Right, let's save this and see what we've got. Okay, it says this page would look better on landscape. We can't get the picture in. Now, if we drag it across, so it looks like it's actually kicking in a bit early because we still can't get this page would look better on landscape. So it is working. Needs a little bit of adjustment so that that picture actually shows fully before that one disappears. So we might adjust that in a second. We can just copy, let's just copy that. And we're going to call that also in photos. Let's just format that up. And again, going back to page, we'll just import the hook. And this is where we set up our variable. I think I might just put it under that one. So we go to photos, and I think as we scroll in, this page will look better on landscape. Yes, that's great. Well, it's not great. It's a really, really ugly site, but the hook is working, is what I meant. Maybe we should just see if we can adjust that quickly. So use orientation. So we've got it. Yeah, it needs to have somewhat more complicated logic there, doesn't it? Because it's not, it's the point where the width gets longer than the height where it starts to think, oh, well, I'm in landscape now, and that's not really good enough. So we would need more complicated logic here to make that work. Okay, so there's the answer. All I've done, I've cheated a little bit. I've just set the image width to 500 pixels. So now when we get to the image coming pretty much fully, and it's not exactly right, the warning disappears. So that's it basically working. As I say, not necessarily a desirable way to put in that particular feature. Of course, your photos should be rendering on desktop or mobile anyway, but there are use cases where you might want to push your user into changing the orientation of their phone, and you can most certainly do it with a hook. So thank you very much for watching. If you found that useful or you have any comments, do let me know, and do click subscribe, do click like if you have liked, and I will hopefully speak to you soon.